let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
We have a
This is so
we
awesome.
are an open culture that believes in
What is that process that a developer, or let's say
as the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of In the Clouds. I am your host, Stu Miniman. Happy 2024. Hope everyone had some time to take off. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, of course, it is the winter holidays. I'm super excited at Red Hat. We actually did shut down for most of the company for a week. It is really amazing when really the entire company goes quiet. You actually forget to look that you have like this device and email and all of that things there. But we are back, and I am super excited to kick off with none other than our president and CEO, Matt Hicks, here in the Boston studio. Matt, happy 2024. How are you? How was your time off?
Thank you, Stu. I've built empathy for sales. I've learned sales has no time off. We close the year.
They delay it a week because I actually really liked it when those of us that had shut down the last week of December came back. The field, for the most part, is off for a week after that. So that first couple of days of like, what am I supposed to be doing and how do I get back on? It's a while before they start inundating you with questions.
But it's good. It's a good start in 2024.
All right. So Matt, you were actually on this program back with our previous host, Chris Short, and it was before you were CEO. So you're now 18 months into the role as CEO, back to In the Clouds. So thank you for joining us. As the first episode of the year, I want to start with last year, 2023, was an interesting and I'd say even a challenging year for the perception of what is happening in the open source world. So maybe if we can start there, Matt, you talked to a lot of customers, you talked to a lot of our peers in the industry. I read the headlines, open source died last year, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, my take on it would be, for me, as like a technologist, probably one of the most exciting years in open source, because I saw, really similarly to like what I saw play out in Linux, start to play out in AI. So I'm like, that is just, and when I say like, what did I see? In the early days of Linux, it was this community of people contributing something where you felt like the pace of it and the innovation of it was going to outstrip everything else on it. Pretty similar feeling looking at models on Hugging Face and the refinement of those and the work that Meta's doing around Llama 2. It's quite incredible on it. Now, the challenges in open source, I would actually frame them of it's ubiquitous at this point. And so when something is ubiquitous and it is used everywhere in every mission critical system, you start to understand the importance of curation and the challenges, and knowing secure supply chain and where you got and all those things. Those are positive problems on it. It's not a challenge to open source. I think it's a maturation in terms of how we use it.
Yeah, Matt, I liked how you framed it because, it's not like open source slowed down at all. Yeah. It's not like there weren't more projects still popping up every week and month. Yeah. I loved, before I joined Red Hat, I'd come to a session here actually, and Ashesh Badani talked about, how many lines of code change every month in Linux and Java and Kubernetes and everything like that. And that chaos and that pace of change and innovation, open source is at the core of that still. Yeah. And I guess you did good, Matt. I think we were 2 minutes in and we got the AI mention, and we're going to talk a lot about AI, but let's bring it home from Red Hat standpoint. I mean, I love one of the things when I joined Red Hat, it's like we have that why of Red Hat. Simon Sinek worked with the team, and it's open unlocks the world's potential. Yeah, is that still the case for Red Hat in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, I usually layer it where I'm like, we do believe that open working in this model, it does unlock incredible potential. A little story I saw just from this last week. There was I'll call him a kid. He was closer to my kid's age than probably to my age. A couple years out of college, I saw him develop and accomplish things in the virtualization and container stack that we had like a 30-year kernel vet that was like, I don't understand how you did that. Like, it's just that potential of being able to find an associate that's remote, that probably hasn't ever been in a Red Hat office, that has a otherworldly understanding, and then being able to bring out that potential is phenomenal. So for us, like, that's the model that we work in everywhere. I think I tend to think of our ambition with it of, when I started 18 years ago, it was make this model credible with enterprises. Like, there's potential, there's intuition there, but how do we make enterprises trust it? And we, did a lot of work on life cycles and support and those things. For me now, it's almost like, how do we make this the default in terms of software on it? Of how do we get more and more? I don't think it's proving now the credibility of it. I think it is, our ambitions have changed. Like, how do we just make this the model for software? So software sort of is never the same after you get to work with that. And it's challenging, but like, I love that challenge on it.
Sure. Matt, I remember the early days of open source was, well, what about security? Is, can I trust it? Is it secure? All that things. Now, open source is the default. I actually had on In the Clouds a few months ago, I had Peter McKay, who's the CEO of Sneak, an open source security company. And it's, can I be most secure with open source? Yes, because I can get more people on it. I can react faster. My friends in the security group, including some of my people, it's like, what you need to do is you need to update faster. And of course, that's one of the core things we do at Red Hat is we can backport fixes, we can work on things, we can swarm on all of that activity. So yeah, it's the models flip. It was the same thing even in cloud. Can I trust the cloud? And now it's like, oh, here's an opportunity to do things differently.
Well, and I've described to a lot of organizations where there is a lot of innovation was traditionally built on hiding it or IP protection, like no one else can get it. Open source does, it changes that, which is a stretch, which is you have to be able to use it better, apply it faster. There's no hiding it. Like, your competitors have access to all the same things, but if you can use it better, your differentiation sits there. And yes, they will catch up faster. So you have to be able to differentiate more. But that model of having more and more companies, more and more individuals working on the same base, I think that's the rising tide floats all boats type challenge where it's really powerful in that. So I haven't seen, given the link to AI as mentioned too, like, I'm as excited that I haven't seen core open source slow down at all. And I'm seeing it being applied to the new exciting spaces. I feel like I'm back in the late 90s again.
And Matt, I love, you brought up one of the things that I've seen change the most in my career. So when I think back to, I'd say go back 15 or 20 years ago, around the time you first joined Red Hat, I'd meet with a large bank, financial services, and like, you're under triple NDA and you can't say a thing about what they're doing, or you're working with government agencies. Now, like, those exact same financial services companies, they meet together once a quarter and they put out minutes as to things they're working on. Would love to get this show's called In the Cloud, so we'll talk about AI in a second, but I was listening to a podcast this morning and it was saying, has cloud just become a feature? Because all of the millions of customers that are using cloud is not the differentiation, because everyone has access to the same primitives, and therefore we need to all share how we're using it and doing it better. And we're working with consultants and we're working with the ecosystem. What's your take on where we are with cloud? Because there's still tons of growth, but it's no longer the shiny new thing anymore. It's now like table stakes.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because I spent a lot of years in IT, doing IT consulting, working in IT directly. And so I'm a believer, and like, I know how challenging it can be around, especially at different points of scale, a data center with hardware and infrastructure changing. It's a tough market sometimes to hire in and hold skills. Software is going 100 miles an hour. And so I do believe in the power of cloud, of like, what can I outsource to let me focus on the things closest to my business? And I think that's why you've seen the major public clouds just explode in popularity because it lets enterprises get closer to where they want to invest versus the things everyone else has. The challenge is I would usually go through, it's like picking it all in one cloud or all in cloud native. It was for a few years, they're treated as the differentiator. And I struggled with the same base. I'm like, all of your competitors have access to exactly the same things. Yep. So it's an enabler. It's not that differentiator. I would say in 23, probably tied to inflation and cost and we can't just grow at any expense. We've got to actually grow and be profitable. Brought back a more balanced approach on it's a feature. I should use cloud where it's really capable and impactful to me, but I also can't just burn down all the assets that I have. I have to be able to use all of them. So that for us, like that's our hybrid vision.
Yeah.
It was a really nice year in seeing customers come back. I think a little less in the all in, this is my strategic approach, and more, how do I use what I have at my disposal to make my business click and move forward?
Yeah, 2023 was absolutely a year that hybrid is even more relevant than ever, and Red Hat's been doing it for over a decade. Yeah. Now, Matt, some have said the killer app for hybrid is going to be AI, because I think, I need to build models and train models and then do inferencing at the edge and all that stuff. Yeah. So before we dive into this big topic of AI, Matt, you're a self-professed geek, you're a technologist. Yeah. Tell me, what's your personal experience? You were talking about, the young associate, doing it. So those of us that have been around a little bit while, would love to hear, what our CEO's doing, playing with in his spare time with AI.
So it's, know me for a while. I like I'm trained as an engineer, and that's usually where my intuition falls. So when I think about this role, I'm like, I'll do best with a lot of that product intuition. And so for me, I'm like, I have to get my hands on, I have to see what works. And when I think of hybrid, the first challenge I usually go through is, can you actually make this run on a laptop? And it serves 2 points, like inference, fancy word for like, how do you go run this model and ask it questions? Similar to what most people probably see in ChatGPT. Like that's inferencing. You're asking it questions, it's answering. If you can run it on a laptop or a small piece of hardware, it opens up the world in Edge for it. Then on the development side, it's, I have always learned as a developer by getting things running, really being able to experiment and go through layers and know it. I'm not a big fan of like, it's a cloud API and I call it and magic happens. And I've seen that a lot in the last 20 years about different technologies that people can't learn. I think a lot of developers don't like a magic layer. Like they really like the visibility they learn from it. I've spent probably like the last 2 months of this, of mostly like transformer models, but other variants as well. But saying like, can I make a vision classifier work on my laptop? No internet. Can I make an audio classifier work? How many large language models can I get to work? Can I fine tune them? So fine tuning just being like, can I give it some of my own audio data and train it to be able to identify a new sound, a new picture? Can I train it to chat with me better or write my emails better on it? Stable diffusion, can I train it with images and make it create images with unique things from my world? And the answer has largely been yes, on my laptop, no interconnectivity for all of those. And for me, I'm like, that's a really powerful thing. Like when developers can do closed loop development, I was flying with a Red Hat associate to Canada, and the whole time on the flight, I'm working with large language models on my laptop, no Wi-Fi. In the airport terminal. So that I think unlocks a lot of potential. So that has been sort of I really do believe it'll be the killer app for hybrid on it. But I also don't think these will be barriers that slow it down because my experience, like it really works well, and there are a lot more talented people than me in doing this, so they will be on fire.
Well, you brought up a great point there. Certain technologies, how is it easily accessible? So, you take examples in the open source community like Docker. Millions of people used it.
Yeah.
The AI absolutely is there. Where I see AI is even a bigger wave than that is this is something that's not just for the business world and the developer, but the chat GPTs and copilots and all those of the world, my nieces and nephews and, everyone else that wouldn't even care what cloud computing is or understand that, they actually have visibility into that today. So the line between, we used to talk for years about the consumerization of IT and, mobile started at, the personal, but, had a significant impact on the enterprise. So, what's AI in general, Matt? You talk to a lot of our customers and you're talking to your peers out that there's no doubt that this is a huge wave, but what were some of the key things you saw in 2023 as you look to 2024? What are some of the, things that we need to accomplish as an industry to turn that excitement into, revenue and productivity and companies not just saying, hey, I have an initiative, but here's the goodness.
Here are the things that worked on it. I love that aspect of every person that you interact with saying, I understand the power in ChatGPT or Perplexity or Anthropic. And that I think has changed it. I would say my customer experience has been every single one of them that I have talked to. Because I usually open most customer meetings like, hey, my time is yours. Like, what is the most helpful thing we can cover that I can go on, share? It's been AI on every single one of them. I have seen that probably towards the end of 2023 start to consolidate on patterns that personally I think will be really effective because we have seen them be effective even within Red Hat. There's the where we started the year, which was I can take these and I can fine tune them and I can make them work for me. That's complex. Like it is very powerful, but in my experience, Mike, you often get a result that's like walking on a cliff face. And if you go off to the side, there's nothing there. Like it requires a lot of art, a lot of expertise to do this well. But then if you go on the other side of the spectrum, we learn things like the RAG pattern, the retrieval augmented generation, where you have existing processes and you can simply take those results and basically run them through an LLM to say, out of this set, what do you think is the best answer? They are very good at this. And it's arguably pretty standard. I've seen more, if you went through like the November, December meetings, more and more companies focusing on these patterns, which I think is great because now you're going to see progress, productivity, you're going to see more success, and it buys that confidence to say, okay, now I'm going to pick my fine tuning area that's going to take more work because I've already got 5 successes under my belt. So that was a trend I saw, which I think is really helpful, powerful. The things to work on in that, you're still closely tied with data that a lot of companies don't want leaving their data centers on it. And finding that balance of, and for most companies, NVIDIA cards are usually most easily accessed in the cloud. Finding that way to work hybrid where you're not having to go back to that all-in-one decision, move all your data out there and hope for the best, hope you pick the right one, but be able to do it safely where you're not losing what is quickly becoming your IP and your asset, which is your data, has sort of been the tricky balance on that. Lots of room to improve there, but that's where I get excited for 2024. I'm like, that's our space.
Yeah, and it's interesting because definitely I've had conversations with customers where that data, like I can just go buy for 5 servers with NVIDIA cards and put it in my data center and make sure that I don't have to worry about leakage or exposure or anything like that. So again, hybrid is flexibility as to you want to do it in the cloud, you want to do it in the data center. Actually probably brings up a good time. Our friends at IBM have been doing a lot, and hybrid is a big piece of their AI story. So help bring them into the discussion, how IBM, open source, model creation, and where does Red Hat fit in the mix?
Yeah, I think there's two patterns that are playing out right now. One is, can you talk to a cloud API behind which is a magic AI model that is really impressive on it? But usually those come with some challenges in the data you feed in, how it's used. Do you own it? Is it used in retraining on that? So there's power there, but there's that hesitation as well of like, do I lose my IP down this process? The IBM and Hugging Face in that area is on the side of, if you want to get 5 NVIDIA cards and 5 servers, you can do a lot. And you can never leave the walls of your own data center if that's what you choose. You can run at the edge and never have your customer data go beyond your edge device if that's what you choose. The unique layering IBM chose to build on OpenShift AI and OpenShift, which lets them run in all these environments. We usually say like OpenShift runs from the International Space Station down to practically everywhere on planet Earth. Yep. So you have that power of a customer in the base that it's built on. But as Red Hat, we don't build models on it. We help you move models from your development to production process. We're not going to step into the Llama 2 versus Orca versus GPT-4 or Bard, or in IBM's case, Granite Slate. Those that takes a lot of expertise, a lot of investment. But IBM's able to marry those two. So their belief in hybrid, their deep integration with OpenShift, OpenShift AI, their Watson X stack sort of tunes a lot of those use cases for a business audience on it. And then what I think is unique, a little more businessy than techie, but they indemnify their model results on it. So you have sort of the commercial terms. Llama 2, I think, actually did pretty well in this, but they have limiters on it. Some others, like an Orca 2, which is powerful, it's non-commercial use. IBM's is commercial use, and then you don't have to worry about the results it's providing because they put the depth there. So.
Yeah, well, Matt, you said it's a little bit businessy, but that indemnification, there's only a couple of companies that have stepped up so far, IBM being one of them, because to go from it is cool and I like playing with it and developers doing some stuff to I'm going to turn this into business. Absolutely that's there. And yeah, look, Matt, thank you for the shout out for the OpenShift stuff in there. I had a great conversation with the IBM team at the AWS reInvent conference because IBM, they're doing it in the cloud too. And they're doing it in the data center and, giving customers that flexibility. I'm curious, Matt, IBM and the relationship with Red Hat has been, I know I sat from the outside when the acquisition happened and it was like, really liked Red Hat. And it was one of the things I've talked a few times about it, but I would not have joined Red Hat. No offense to our friends at IBM, but I wasn't looking at this point in my career to join IBM. I worked for Red Hat and still here in 2024, I work for Red Hat. IBM, I have friends there. I work with them a ton, do lots of enablement and things like that. Is the relationship with IBM when it comes to AI a little bit different maybe than some of the past? How's that relationship between IBM and Red Hat working?
I think the fundamentals of sort of we're based more on partnership, but that haven't changed. That said, we build an software infrastructure product to help enable AI. They're the deepest partnership we have there. They provide models. We're in many of the same customers. And so for us, a lot of that has been with IBM's research team, who knows this deeply. You can think of this almost as how we work with an Intel on it. But that depth in research, we don't fabricate chips, but Intel does. We don't build foundation models, but IBM does. And our ability to work at a level of depth that we don't have, to tune our software to it, it's really been refreshing. It's been cool. I've been multiple times now to Yorktown as we both look at the AI areas, but then that's starting to lead in new research areas like quantum, which is only a step removed from this space. Like quantum will impact AI, which will impact these same platforms. That has been more vibrant, I would say, in the last year than we always worked with. And we've worked with IBM Research for 20 years at this point, from power work and other areas on. We have done the most in the last year with those teams. But I think it serves that joint solution for customers on it. So that's been exciting, but we love the other areas. I mean, Hugging Face, Starburst, like we have a lot of other partners that are critical parts of those solutions.
Yeah, actually, and I'll tell my audience, if you haven't seen it already, go look. There was a great 60-minute segment with IBM talking about quantum computing. It's one of those technologies. I mean, Matt, from my standpoint, it was like, we've been talking about quantum for years and IBM's been pushing it, but you're right. It's finally, I'm starting to see the connection between what we're doing at Red Hat, and the reality of it coming forth, not just, it for so long it's been, in the next, 2 to 5 years we'll get there. And that 2 to 5 years just keeps shifting and shifting. And it feels much closer. And it's good, interesting to hear from you, the kind of the AI quantum, similarities and relationship there.
When you walk through Yorktown, you can basically like put your hand on a working quantum machine on one side. And if my arms were a little longer, like put your hand on the like AI GPU clusters driving a lot of the AI data cleansing work on the other side of the hall. And like that interaction is, it's exciting for me as a technologist. So like we have open source going 100 miles an hour. You look at areas like quantum with Qiskit and these things, that's your foray into quantum, this open source. If you look at AI, you only have to go look at Hugging Face. So like that same model is through and through in that space. It's how I've learned myself. I just love it. So it's been a good year in 23. I think it'll be a better one in 24.
Yeah. There were a lot of articles last year talking about how will open source play in the whole AI discussion. As you said, we at Red Hat, we're not doing the models themselves. So there's lots of companies. There's IBM and many others have invested in Hugging Face. Where do you see open source really playing the role in AI?
It's a tricky one because I do think there's a difference, but I've also been really surprised in, first you start with, is there enough of a contributor base that can even do anything with this stuff? Like this is a deep academic math-based area. Go look at the amount of fine tuning, not like what I'm doing of give it 5 pictures of me, see if I can get a picture. This is in-depth refinement of large language models for research. It appears to me there is a staggeringly large community of people with the expertise to drive it. So I'm like, that's sort of step one. Will those individuals build new base foundation models? I don't think so. That's probably in the hundreds of millions of dollars in cost. But I think more of the use cases are in the 5 NVIDIA cards and being able to do refinements that are very impactful with it, whether that's in the multimodal space or refining language and concepts to your company and differentiators. That's where I think the open aspect will apply. Where I've seen in Hugging Face is it's not just making it work. People explain how they made it work, their data cards, their sources, how they applied it. It does feel like there's a real power there, but it won't be code contributions. It won't be foundation model contributions. But I think you'll see it in these specializations that are really, really impressive to me to feel the similarities there.
Yeah. You wonder sometimes the industry as a whole is putting so much focus here. You talk about kind of contributions and going out there. When I look at, the Linux Foundation and the CNCF, there is always a call for, we need more contributions. Yes, it's great. Red Hat, we contribute a ton and we are always trying to help the community. Any commentary on just kind of the strength of communities in open source and how we get more contribution? What are we doing at like the foundational educational levels to make sure that there's the next generation isn't just going to be like, oh yeah, I use ChatGPT and I don't know how to do anything else.
Yeah, it's It's tricky for me. I think it's in the having commercial models be successful. That's at its core. I'm heavily biased party, but I don't think open source would be as successful as it was without companies like Red Hat that can put all of our R&D in this area, because we found a model that lets us be commercially successful and grow while being focused on it. There have been threats and challenges to that model. I don't think that's necessarily good. So I don't think it's only education. I think it's really fostering that commercial adoption as well, that allows companies to contribute. AI, I think it'll be very similar. I think we're in the early VC research phase of it. When I equate that back to Linux, it's like when you have 35 different Linux distros to choose from. There's lots of excitement in that. There's usually a consolidation phase that follows, where then you start to see real productivity build on it. And I think we'll see that same thing in AI. But if companies find those commercial models and can still fall into the contribution Hugging space, I think we'll see the same health that we've seen there as we've seen in Linux, Kubernetes, other areas. But
all right. So I've got a non-technology question for you, Matt. We were talking about kind of the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
One of the hot button topics last year was, what about hybrid work? What's happening as to where we work. Red Hat pre-pandemic, I know, was not quite half of the organization was remote, and today we're very friendly to remote. My personal team, I've got 7 people in 5 countries. There's only one that goes to the office regularly. I come in to the Boston office about once a week. What are you seeing out there? How's Red Hat looking at it? How do we look at our talent acquisition around the globe? And it is that balance. I know, I love walking around an office and bumping into people and sharing ideas. And there are certain things that you just don't get if you're only remote. But at the same time, it's like, hey, we're not forcing anybody to come to offices. Yeah. So
I would say, I think varies a lot on role with it. So the story I shared of 20-some-year-old kid creating things that he just shouldn't have been able to learn that well in a couple years. You always want to be able to utilize that and really make the most and foster it. That's pure creation. That's sort of in the, you only had to learn code and it's all open. And I don't know how you got through it all and absorbed it and could be creative enough to see paths that other people haven't, but it is possible on it. For me, that is the core of our remote strategies. We can have creators that just on their knowledge of code and little else can be really incredibly influential and impactful. But then when you move up to, say, an open source maintainer, you have to have networks, and you could maybe build them all remote. But in the olden days, it was going to conferences and meeting people and establishing your trust bases. People come into those roles. When you get into a lot of other roles within the company, people are the center of your role. And I do think we hit the tension everyone else does of, I think we've got to pick really carefully of what roles can you genuinely be successful in the long haul and grow your career purely remote. We have the tools. We know we can make hybrid work. But I think this is our year of intentionality to figure out one of the surprising challenges I've had in this role is it's the younger audience that has asked me to mandate people back to the office more than anyone else, because they're ambitious and they want to learn, and they don't have the same benefits I did in a thriving office to have that exposure. That's something we have to solve. You can't lose your next generation of workers because you can't progress them at their desire on it. So that's, I think, the problem to solve. Remote is very powerful for us in roles. And then it's finding the balance of, we have more flexibility, I think, and being productive than we've ever had, but we can't give up on the office, or we're sort of giving up on a generation of workers that probably need
Yeah, you need to be able to build that network effect.
Yeah.
It's, I was thankful, I came in, peak pandemic, and was almost a year that I didn't see, a year and a half in the company where I wasn't seeing people in person. But luckily, I knew a whole bunch of the people in the organization, and they all knew me. So it helped that. But it's not an easy thing, and we're constantly working at trying to make it better. And I'm not surprised at all that the younger people would want that in general. All right, Matt. You're 18 months now into this role. So you mentioned, one of the things that surprised you. Anything else that kind of has struck you over the last 18 months of, boy, I ran products. Been here 18 years, but, now sitting in the big seat is a little bit different.
Yeah, I would say the exposure I've gotten is just the intricacy between all of the different functions and how critical they are. I think it's something people always underappreciate. Like you grew up in engineering, you're like, well, engineering really carries the bulk of this work on it, and then other people do something. Sitting in my seat, seeing the creativity in our marketing teams to be able to just explain what we have and connect in like a sea of froth, then the creativity that it takes of our sales teams to be ridiculously technical, but still be able to connect of what a customer's trying to solve. I have been on more support escalations of just seeing what our teams can do in a customer fire on it. It's incredible. So I've really loved the just appreciation for what it takes to run a company. It's one of the things I've loved in Red Hat. I always say I'll take the passion over the I just come in 9 to 5 on it. And passion, like, it's hard to direct sometimes, but there's a lot of passion and creativity that I see in every single function in the company. It's been very cool. That's something I didn't get. I thought I was pretty well networked into every group. Making that shift in role has given me the opportunity just to see even more that wasn't readily apparent to me before. But I've loved it. I like learning those. I've always liked learning outside of sort of the box in engineering that I came from, and thoroughly enjoyed that.
All right. Well, Matt, I'll let you give you the final word. 2024. What are you looking forward to? What are some of the key things we should be keeping an eye on? I'll give a quick shout out, of course, everyone in the audience. Our conference, Red Hat Summit, I believe the page has gone up now, and it's there because it's going to be in May, and the first time ever in Denver, Colorado. So that should be fun and interesting. I'm sure looking forward to it. But 2024, Matt.
No, 2024. I think it's going to be just a year of progress. I think a lot of stuff stabilized on it, just in the market in general. And for us, like, we have this Linux at the core of everything, distributed computing being needed with OpenShift, ops challenges with Ansible, and the hybrid year with AI. That'll lead for a really exciting year to be able to pull those, just to be able to get to participate in that progress. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, Matt Hicks, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks,
it's
Stu.
a pleasure having you on there. To our audience, of course, you always love your feedback and recommendations. What topics should we be covering? Any guests that we should have? We will be probably doing about once a month on these. We try to do bi-weekly, but we've got our sales kickoff and lots of other things that usually come in the way. But as always, check it out. Give us your feedback. And thanks for joining us on your journey in the clouds.